really
the shingles,
pissing me
how can you have a deck on it, but I'm sure you guys have thought about things.
Or is it really?
Or
Yeah.
maybe it doesn't have a shingle, you know.
LA is it's happening. Yeah, I saw it.
That's what I'm interested to see,
So-
I guess, how to solve that.
We can get into it.
Yeah, good, good.
Maybe, I don't know. Debbie, it's layers of that. My social security number is in the control of some idiot.
Who is not?
Nope, hasn't passed
Ready
the
for more
background
salty
check.
discussions?
Absolutely. Is there any other?
Correct. I work with those people.
You can
I'm
pepper
not
in some
interested.
different stuff.
Some compliments here and there?
Of everything.
I saw it just.
Hey
Yes.
guys. I mean, Jamie Raskin.
Yeah, but
Hi,
when they
Do you know?
intentionally try to get you to sound.
Did you get my email? Yay.
Like a year and a little bit.
Ah, no problem. I just sent it.
When they intentionally try to sound every alarm
Anyway.
as a distraction. I don't know how you,
I talked to
Keep up.
Lauren on
it's
Friday.
so bad. You can't keep up.
Like he did
It
stuff.
literally is every time I look at my phone.
I know.
Yeah,
Every minute.
and it's, you know, partly because
Sorry,
I
not
said-
to eavesdrop.
it's a unique.
No.
Oh.
I've been a vet center at
Yeah.
Traverse City Whiskey Company for a little over a year.
Requirements
But I was at
of
Oak
the
Creek for 10 years before that.
Yeah, yep.
But I was like.
Can't wait for that county meeting tomorrow where they determine safe harbor fund.
Are
Are
you
you
Title.
I don't know. I have a doctor's appointment, so I don't think I can
Is it
go.
during the morning?
Mm-hmm. They have their meetings
Right.
at
It's not like they have
9 or something.
Right,
to
yeah.
continue to practice it a lot, so.
So you don't like Costco? I'm like their biggest fan, so.
I don't understand. You're only two people, like.
It's not a walkable location.
Everything is huge amounts of stuff. That's why I don't go.
That's true. We only buy certain things. But I walked out and saw Shay and he looked miserable, so
Great for diapers, Shay.
I was like.
About all we're gonna buy there is diapers. I'm
Well,
like,
formula, if you ever start using
I
it,
would
or baby food.
say, what do we get most there? It's like salads.
Sorry, I'm having hydration liquid, that's why it's a funny color. I'm
Yeah.
hydrating.
cheese. They're really good for cheese.
Not drinking pee.
Yeah.
No,
in
it's
giant
I guess
quantities,
it
and
kinda
I don't know
does.
about
Looks
your house,
green.
but
It
we
looks
go
green.
through cheese like.
It's orange,
We
actually.
don't.
Oh, really?
Okay.
We don't
horrible.
eat a
So it
lot of
worked out
cheese.
really well for us. What else?
So, Mitch,
Mm.
so we're just missing Brian, is that?
And Jerry.
And Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know if they're coming?
Yeah. I
Well,
have it.
Jerry's right there.
Jerry.
There's Jerry, and we still have 2 minutes, we're good.
And like I said, I think Brian protests.
Did you see the
Protest
email
the
I
timely
sent? You
arrival.
talked to
Change
Katie.
it.
Did you see the
I
email?
think he's finishing his dinner
I
and
talked
then he
to
comes
Katie
in.
about it.
Oh, I saw, I didn't see
It's okay.
the
She needs to talk to her
responses.
board, but she really wants to come. I didn't give her, Katie Beretta, to our next meeting,
There he is.
next.
There he is.
I just said, you know, I don't want it to be very long.
We have
how
2
much
according to that
time
clock.
You're gonna need. We had a nice chat. She really wants to help out.
Good, good.
Evening.
Look at this nice full table.
Hmm? You're not getting a smile, though. I'll be here, but I'm not smiling.
We will begin in 1 minute.
I like
grab
this
those agendas and put it
ClearGov.
Isn't it cool? Did
It
you
was
go on
pretty
that?
cute.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to not notice issues, though, so I was,
Of course.
Well, you should tell Sean what they are.
oh, well.
Wait, with the packet?
No,
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 with
with
ClearGov.
the software,
Oh, yeah.
with ClearGov software.
I just thought
It's
it was
not
nice
clear
not to have all
enough
those
for you?
papers.
No,
Or it's too govy.
both. No, I hate, it's like one of my biggest pet peeves when designs extend outside of the boundary. I do this like for a living, so if you look at the right-hand side of the page, all the numbers just keep going and get cut off.
Yeah.
And it's just really bad user experience. That was my biggest complaint.
I want to know those exact numbers.
Well, you have to click the little plus and then you can see them, but I don't want to do that. I want to see it right there.
Give Brian a minute. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone, to the regular meeting of the Traverse City Planning Commission, February 4th. As always, we will start with our land acknowledgement. The land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Do we need to take a roll call?
Commissioner Duturi,
Here.
Commissioner Hershey,
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Here.
Commissioner Knapp,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Here.
Commissioner Heller,
Here.
Commissioner McGillivray,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
and Commissioner Swanson.
Here.
Full house. Great. Do we have any announcements?
Nope, none at this time.
Anybody else have any announcements? All right, we'll move on to number 5A, approval of the minutes. We're approving 2 sets of minutes here, January 7th and January 22nd.
I move to approve the minutes from the regular meeting on January 7th and the study session from January 22nd, 2025.
Thank you,
Second.
Commissioner Turi. Who seconded?
Second.
Thank you, Shay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That moves on to old business. Number 6, review and potential approval of the amended bylaws. Mr. Winter.
Yeah, thank you. So at the beginning of the calendar year, as we always do, we provide that space for the Planning Commission to review their bylaws and make any changes that they see fit. This is the third consecutive meeting we've talked about this. And we've kind of gone around on a couple topics, but where it was left off at the last one was simply moving forward with changes to the bylaws that would include an additional non-voting member, which would be the Grand Traverse County's Community Development Coordinator. So the intent that was expressed was to have that broader regional view at the table. So if you recall from the last meeting, we mentioned that in the process of doing the iterations, we had left off the previous language about the student liaison that the Planning Commission had voted into the bylaws in July of 2022. So I put that into your packet last week, read, and brought it to your attention for purposes of transparency. So really the only change there is the addition of the county liaison. So with that, we kind of restructured the language a little bit, and in doing so, I noticed there is a typo. So under item 3 in the bylaws where it says membership of the commission, item B, liaison members, it goes on to say that at the direction of the planning director, the planning commission may include 2 non-voting liaison members. The liaison member shall have the full authority to participate in all discussions and shall have the ability to serve on the established committees. So that text that follows that sentence through the end of the paragraph is actually redundant and can be removed. Okay, so if that created confusion, I apologize, because we tried to, with the addition of a second non-voting liaison member, to categorize the 2 of them below, and so the language just was dangling there. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. And with that, those are the only changes incorporated. If the Planning Commission desires to approve the amended bylaws tonight, there is a suggested motion in there. If not, if there are more changes and desired, then that could be expressed as a body, and we can incorporate those.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions about the bylaws? Jackie?
I thought I would just fill everyone in on a series of emails that were exchanged with myself and Sean and the city attorney over the specifics of the appointment of the county liaison. And I am really excited about this opportunity to include that perspective, and I want us to be great partners from the very start. And I was trying to put myself in the position of a county administrator or official whose employee is being appointed to this commission, and could involve quite a commitment of time. So I had just asked for some assurance that indeed the county liaison was going to be chosen in concurrence and with the participation of someone from the county.
Oh.
And yes, that is indeed true. And I also was wondering about the term of service for that individual. You know, it would be the only person who has an open-ended term rather than a 2-year, like the student liaison or a 3-year like most everybody else here. So just wanted to bring that up as an anomaly.
It makes sense to me that the term is a little more open-ended because it's not like there would be a ton of turnover in that position. And also we review these every year. So if we get like 3 or 4 years down the road and we decide we want to put in a term limit or something, because it's the same person, we could always amend the bylaws to say that, I think.
Absolutely
But
true.
Can we clarify who's actually making the, I mean, I don't think it's a planning commission.
No, we could
choice
just
the way
change
it's
it in the
written.
bylaws.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
that, to add to that, the commission can do that at any point, too. We just provide that space at the beginning of the year, just with intentionality, but at any point, the planning commission can change its bylaws.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So if Grand Traverse County decides to abolish this position and thus they don't have anybody that would
And it's
serve
not.
this liaison purpose, we can find some other title to put in that and amend our
Or
bylaws
the
accordingly.
predecessor of that person. Oh, you said they got rid of it, yeah, but if the person left, predecessor.
I'll make the motion to approve the City of Traverse City amended Planning Commission bylaws as presented, including the changes that Sean talked about.
Support.
Any other discussion at this point or questions? Is there any public comment about the bylaws for the Planning Commission? Right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, Shay, I'll just add, if you have time afterwards, we'll require your signature.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll print it out.
Okay, so that moves us on to old business 6B, Planning Commission goals.
Yeah, so this is kind of like the final packaging of the goals, which this conversation started in earnest actually in the fall after the adoption of the master plan, and then it was added to at the beginning of the year like we do for setting the individual annual goals of the Planning Commission. So what Leslie has put together here is basically a summary of what you all had discussed and the direction that you had provided. The goals aren't ranked in necessarily priority order. It is perceived by us that one priority would be to finish what we've already started, so short-term rentals and the riparian buffer. So that, since that's an action, we're going to be moving through that and then going through this list. So again, if this is something that the Planning Commission is satisfied with, they may vote to adopt these today, or if there's specific direction from the body, we can take those back and incorporate them and bring them in there, or bring them back at the next meeting. But again, just note that with the goals, again, we use them, as I keep saying, as like our North Star, right? We don't know exactly what's coming down the pipe at any moment that we'll have to deal with. Yeah, we do our best through it each year, and then we build off it in the coming year.
Any questions or comments about the goals? Nope. I just have one comment, which is the objectives. Again, this is sort of like our working document. So under improved communications, the objectives you see there could be more. That's because we're still working on it. If it makes you feel better, we can add a bullet point that says, and any other communication tools as determined by the planning director and planning commission if you think that's necessary. Otherwise, there could be more things that are added. Yes.
I don't think it's necessary.
Thank you.
There's a lot of things in here that say, we're going to do this.
Right.
But when we get to it and actually get into it, we may decide we're not going to actually do it. So really, all of these are all just things we're looking at, and we're going to do a lot of things that aren't on these goals.
Right.
So.
I agree. So I just wanted to say that for anybody who's watching, that this isn't a be-all and end-all.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the questions on my mind was the source of the objectives and the flexibility inherent in them, and why we didn't have any objectives for the short-term rental goal, which seemed to me to be one of our highest priorities. But as long as this is open-ended and, you know, if we have suggestions for objectives, what should we do with those? How should we?
I mean, they could be added in later, can't they?
Yep, they could be added in at any point. I mean, I think Brian summarized it pretty well. You know, this is a list to work off of. We will do things not on this list, and there will be things on this list that we don't do. So in other words, your hands aren't tied to it, so it's really your preference on how you want to memorialize that information.
I guess in terms of like organizational preference, I would think that if we have an objective that we suggest be added as an objective, we can forward it to the chair and to the planning director, and then they can see fit like when and where to, like, because we had talked about maybe checking in on these goals and objectives quarterly. Maybe
Yeah.
that's a space where we're like, this quarter, we got this added recommendation for this objective.
Yeah.
And we can cover it that way.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have a motion.
Go ahead.
I have to go up to it. I should have said it after. I move to approve the City of Traverse City amended Planning Commission 2025 goals as presented.
Second.
Well, I don't know who said that. Who
It
was
was
first?
both of them, Shay and Mitch.
Shay and Mitch. So, okay. Are there any public comments regarding the goals of the Planning Commission? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right, so we're going to move on to old business C, continued discussion on zoning amendments to increase density in the R2. I've lost it. There we go. To increase the density in R2.
Yep, so this is a continuation from the last two meetings, actually. This came out originally in the goals discussion, and it was suggested if this was queued up to bring it up to the last meeting, which we did. And this is one of those items that was specifically called for in the action plan portion of the master plan. Again, we discussed how this was one of the amendments that the Planning Commission recommended to the City Commission in the summer of '23. The City Commission chose this, among others, to formally introduce to bring for a vote, but no vote happened on this one. As I mentioned, it was the last one of the night. I've talked to some of the city commissioners. They didn't necessarily feel it was with intentionality. I think everyone was tired from a very long meeting. And so it just kind of has been dangling out there. So the Planning Commission had us bring it back. There was a request for some additional information at the last meeting, so that is what is being presented here. So first, to give a little context in the R2. So the R2 district historically has allowed 2 dwellings per lot. It's never been mandated that they be in the same structure, so a lot of R2 lots actually have 2 separate detached homes on them. So where do we typically find the R2? Well, the R2 usually exists between lower intensity R1 zoning and higher intensity corridor or downtown zoning. So it creates a transition in density and intensity between those 2 levels. Now, within the city's zoned land, so when I say zoned land, that is exclusive of our right-of-ways and our water bodies and things like that. The private lots of records or publicly owned lots of records that could be developed. So the city is approximately 4,500 acres of zoned land, and so R2 accounts for 103 of those acres. So only 2.3% of the city's zoned land or legal lots of record. So we went through and we did a lot count of all the parcels that are zoned R2, and it gets a little tricky, all right? I'll do my best to try to explain this. Jerry may have to chime in because he deals with this data a lot too, but parcel numbers, also known as tax ID numbers. You may have scenarios where a lot could have more than one tax ID number. For instance, if you had a lot that had a duplex, so 2 dwelling units, and they decided to do a site condo so each one could be owned individually, that lot now has 3 tax IDs, one for each of the 2 units, and then one for the common element, which is usually the land surrounding the building. So it took a little finessing of the data to kind of sort through it and filter it and get this information. So the best that we could come up with was 480 unique tax IDs in the city that are zoned R2. Of those 480, 12 of them are what we call common elements. So those are owned by the associations where we've site condoed properties. Only 6 lots in the city that are zoned R2 are currently classified as vacant. 4 of them are institutional. So those include Central Grade School, which is a whole entire city block zoned R2 in and of itself because it's one single parcel. There's a couple city-owned properties, and one is a church, I think, on 6th Street is it a church or the Scientologist? Yeah, okay. And
First
Christian Science Reading.
I didn't think it
Okay,
was
sorry, I was
Scientology.
trying to remember, it's like I can see it. Sorry.
Next to the
They would
Friday.
take offense at that.
Yeah, yeah.
And no offense meant, I was just trying to draw from memory. Got the science part right. So with that, we have most of that land already developed. And again, that's one of those limiting factors that I'll go into here in a second. So, we often hear of a lot of out-of-state developers and people buying properties and stuff, but just out of curiosity, since I had that parcel database, of those 400 and unique tax IDs, I sorted them by owners, city, and 425 of those 480 are owned by people who have a Traverse City mailing address. 55 of them are of the 55 that don't have a Traverse City mailing address. 23 of the owners are in Northwest Lower Michigan, so like Elk Rapids, places like that. 12 are located elsewhere in the state, and so only 20 of them are owned by entities located out of the state. So I bring that to your attention because that's the actual data may not align with what we hear sometimes as perceptions out there. So specifically, the Planning Commission wanted information on the on average lot area and lot width in the R2 district, and as you can see there is quite a bit of spread. So the minimum lot size for an R2 lot is 4,000 square feet. There has been no changes proposed to that, and there was none in the 2023 amendments as well. Now, in order to split a lot, you have to have at least twice the minimum area. So you would need at least an 8,000 square foot lot to do a split. Now, there's other variables that make lot splits challenging besides having the minimum area that you need. You have to also have twice the minimum width so that each resulting lot has the minimum street frontage. And you can't create any new nonconformities with your lot split. So your lot split can't draw a property line that would be in the setback of an existing building. So that is some of the challenges that people face when they do have a large lot and being able to split it if it's already been developed with the house. Now, the City Commission did support the Planning Commission's recommendation to allow 2 homes on a double lot without it being split, but they have to be single-family homes, and that applies for the R2 as well. So when we look at the R2 lot area, there is quite a large spread. The smallest R2 lot we have is 1,035 square feet, so just over a quarter of the minimum. This one's located on 7th Street near Wadsworth. It's a little tiny postage stamp of a lot that barely fits the house. Just to recap, any legal lot of record, even if it's less than the minimum area, can be developed. They just still have to meet all the dimensional standards of the district. So you can't really prohibit them unless you're willing to pay them for the value of their property. The largest lot area that we have in the R2 district, which is quite an outlier, is Central Grade School at almost 200,000 square feet. Again, it's the entirety of a city block located right there in the heart of the central neighborhood. So that's the spread that we have. The average or the median lot area is 8,267. So if you put all the lot areas from smallest to largest, the number or the value that falls directly in the middle is just over twice the minimum for the district, with the average lot area being just over 12,500 square feet, or 3 times the minimum lot area for the district. So all in all, the data indicates there's some pretty large lots in the R2 based on the minimum dimensional standards. So for lot width, the minimum is 35 feet that you have to create a new lot. So therefore, in addition to meeting the minimum lot area requirements, to do a split, you would need to have 70 feet, or twice that minimum of road frontage. And keep in mind, a legal lot in the city has to have street frontage. So that when you have some of these narrow, long lots, you might have the area to be able to split it, but you can't split it if it doesn't have frontage on a street. So with that, we also looked at the data of the lot widths. The average lot width is 70 feet for the R2 district, so that's right at that double the minimum. The median, however, is 50 feet, still more than the minimum, but again, medians in cases like this may be a little more beneficial than average, because 1 or 2 outliers can throw your averages way off. Because if you look there, I mean, that's a 20-foot difference between median and average. So the smallest lot width we have in the R2 district is 14 feet, and the largest or the maximum that we have in the district for lot width is 428 feet. So this is, again, quite a spread. I was just thinking about it today, since no action can occur on this issue till after the March 4th public hearing. What I will probably do is bring this data back to you as a histogram or a bar chart that breaks it down into like 5 or 10 foot intervals, so you can visually see how many lots are kind of falling within those ranges, as opposed to just putting it in a table. But I apologize, I didn't have that foresight ahead of time. So in talking with the master plan alignment, again, the master plan does talk quite extensively about addressing housing. It specifically calls for increasing the density in the R2 to 4 dwelling units per lot, keeping in mind that the language as presented would require that everything stay in scale with what is allowed today. So if this was to be approved and someone was interested in building 3 units or 4 units, they get no additional development privileges or rights. The building can't be taller, it's not allowed more impervious area. We have historically allowed 2 residential structures on an R2 lot, so that is maintained. So you could get, let's say, 4 dwelling units in a number of combinations. You could have 2 duplex structures, so 2 and 2 is 4. You could have a triplex, maybe with an ADU, that equals 4, or you could have 1 quadplex. So there's a couple different ways that people could achieve that density. It doesn't have to all be the exact same. So again, the information in your packet does include some references to the future land use map. Now, the future land use map is used primarily for rezonings. This isn't a rezoning, this is a text amendment. But I put that in there to give you some context of where the R2 is located in reference or in relation to the future land use maps. Now, a future land use map and a zoning map, they're not the same thing. It's really difficult to make comparisons between them because they have intent or different purposes, but one is used to inform the other. So with that said, there is support for this in the master plan, as you've discussed previously. So moving on, I went through and just summarized all that data in the different sections into one table for you. And then I threw in that graphic from back when we were talking about this last year, because these questions do sometimes come up, why aren't there more houses being built? There's a lot of challenges to it, right? Yes, zoning, a change like this could be applicable to 480 parcels, if you will, but at the end of the day, the amount of development or housing that you see realized is going to be determined by a number of limiting factors. One, the site conditions have to allow the development that you're authorizing through any kind of amendment. So we just talked earlier how sometimes a developed lot with an existing house on it may not be able to be split, even though they have the minimum or the minimum width and area requirements, but you can't create a nonconformity, so that automatically takes some options off the table. At the end of the day, a property owner has to want to do it. If they don't want to convert their property into another use, then that property likely is not going to change. We know that things are extremely expensive when it comes to construction in our area, and as we hear from people, that is quite a limiting factor right there. And if anyone's ever tried to do any kind of construction in the last 10 years in this area, it's also very difficult to find contractors, to move that along. And most of these changes that we've been discussing over the last, 4 years at the Planning Commission level are really one-offs. I think that's important to remember. With these type of projects, you're not really dealing with developers often. You're dealing with property owners, and they own one piece of property most often, and they want to make an improvement to it. Well, that's not a model that they can replicate unless they own a bunch of other properties. And most homeowners aren't in that situation. Developers may, but most of these are one-time projects that one property owner is going to do one time to their property, and that's the end of it. But every little bit helps in the grand scheme of things. So just wanted to put that out there. Again, no action at this time. That was just the information that the Planning Commission had requested. I'll turn it back over to the chair so you guys can have discussion. If there's anything else that the body wants in terms of specific information, we can try to bring that back for the next study session, keeping in mind that it will also be open for discussion on March 4th, which will have the public hearing, and that no action can be taken until at least the close of the public hearing.
Thank you for that thorough explanation. Any questions or comments?
I think it might be beneficial to add, whether for future discussion or the public hearing, the R1 kind of history that you shared at one of our previous meetings where it only rendered 5 building permits, just for comparison's sake.
Anyone else? Jackie?
I was going to ask if Sean could possibly, in his next round of data, identify for us how many and which of the current R2 lots are actually configured so that they could accommodate 4 dwelling units. I think that would be helpful to understand. Is that doable?
Well, from a regulatory standpoint, if this was approved, all of them could.
If you're talking about building permits, then that's not Sean's purview.
Okay. You've been giving some reassuring comments about how relatively low impact you expect this text amendment to be, and I guess I'd like to see if it's possible to wrap some information around that.
Yeah, I guess my point is, the way that land use laws work, that when you say which ones would be eligible for 4 units, if this zoning went into effect, it would be all of them. All lots would be eligible for that.
Not necessarily buildable.
Not necessarily buildable, but that depends, you know, like someone may say, hey, I have this 80-year-old, 1-story, 600 square foot home that, you know, is kind of dilapidated. I don't know if in their head it makes financial sense to tear it down and build a quadplex. I can't answer that question for them.
But you would be able to assess with setbacks and you know, square footage of the lot and so forth. Wouldn't you?
Well, for new builds you would, but
Well, remember
that,
I said for any legal lot of record, so any one of those 480 can be developed with all the uses allowed in the district. So size and setbacks and stuff don't really come into effect on that.
Okay.
It would
All
only
right.
be for lot splits. We could probably have that to you by May, honestly, because we would have to go through and measure all 480 lots against the buildings and stuff, and it would take a very long time.
Oh, that would not be timely, would it?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm not understanding maybe quite what you're asking.
We're hearing information about the 2023 round of zoning density changes that at this point, you know, 18 months down the road, there's only been 5 building permits issued, and that the impact has been minimal on the character of the community, and the implication is that this will be a similar experience for the neighborhoods that are impacted. And I am trying to quantify that expectation. I'm trying to understand, are there configurations of parcels included with the building restrictions inherent in terms of setbacks and height and so forth that simply would be highly unlikely to become a fourplex?
well, that is a matter of what a builder wants to do. Yes, you could set those standards that would apply to a new build, but if you were saying, hey, here is a single-family house in R2 zoning that, based on setbacks and whatever, is non-conforming, but you're going to convert it into a 3-plex or 4-plex completely through internal renovations, then that would be a case where the building looks the same on the outside, it was previously non-conforming, it's being converted into a higher density, but that is on paper non-conforming, but since it's the same external footprint, I see no reason why that wouldn't run afoul.
Ryan?
So, let me ask a couple questions of Mr. Winter. What you're saying is if I have a lot and it's only 30 feet wide, and it's an R2 zone, you could not prevent me from building on a quadplex on that lot?
Correct.
Just because of that, I'd be entitled to a variance or whatever, because it's an existing legal lot. So you would have to waive the width of that. But you wouldn't necessarily have to waive the lot coverage. So we don't have a minimum dwelling unit size, do we?
We don't. And
So if I only can put a 400 square foot building on that lot, I could create 4 100-foot units, but it would still be a quadplex. Or I could ask for a variance. Or I could ask for variance on the setbacks. But that's a question for the BZA. That's always out there when you have a non-conforming lot. But they're still going to be restricted by even with all the other lots, they're only going to be restricted by setbacks and their ability and the lot coverage, and then they can build up to 4 units on that in a configuration that works for them, that doesn't impact that doesn't violate setbacks, lot coverage, meets the building
And building.
codes, and height. And everything else is going to be simply up to what they think they can market or sell. Now, maybe they decide that with only 400 square feet, they go 2 stories and they do a duplex instead. 400 feet's pretty small. That's what I would do. But it's always going to be up to the market on how they handle that. But I understand what you're saying, and then trying to fit something and decide what can be fit in that and whether or not it's buildable, you could spend an hour or more on each lot just trying to figure that out and what's buildable, and then there's a whole question of what's feasible. Whole different question, which you're not going to get that answer. So, yeah, I understand that's the way I understand your answer. So as long
Yeah.
as the legal lot, it can build it. How they have to build it or how they have to construct it, that's a whole nother story.
yeah, and that Brian makes a good point that maximum lot coverage is proportional to the lot size, and that's not changing. I have no authority to waive that standard. That would have to be to the BZA as well. And people often think, well, when we tell them you can't do something, they're like, well, I'm just going to go ask for a variance from the BZA. I'm like, you can, but you have to demonstrate a hardship. Just wanting it isn't a hardship, and it can't be.
Right.
It can't be because of economic reasons. It specifically says that in the law. You can't grant a variance because it'd be cheaper to build it this way under a variance. That can't happen. And it can't be a hardship of your own making, so you can't split your lot and end up with the bare minimum size and then be like, well, this is too small for a quadplex, I need a variance. And I'm like, well, you made that lot, that was your choice, so you have to live with that. There is another variable in play that's outside the city regulations, and that's the construction code. We don't have minimum dwelling sizes in the city. You often see that in the townships. There was an email sent to you about tiny homes. You could have it as small as you want as far as what the city wants or what the city requires. The construction code office, though, they have standards. There's a minimum square footage for a bathroom, a minimum square footage for a bedroom. So yeah, our land use, you might be able to get 3 dwelling units on a lot based on our dimensional standards, but based on how big each room has to be by the construction code office standards, you might only be able to fit 2 within that structure. So these are other limiting factors that people have to work with when they think about developing a site.
Thank you. May I
Yes.
continue unless other folks
ahead,
have
go ahead.
questions? As I looked at each of the R2 districts and where they are located currently, I was struck by how distinct they are from each other in terms of both the existing structures that are there and also the demographics of the neighborhoods. And is there any consideration to not treating the entire existing R2 zone as a monolith and set some guidelines that are more reflective of the existing character of those locations?
Can you define character for us?
I wish I could. Can you?
No.
No.
And that's the
You're the
problem
one
with
that
that
invokes the
argument, I
word.
think, is that the character is defined by every individual.
Well, let's try.
Please do.
Part of it certainly would be visual. Part of it would involve the residents. Part of it would involve their lifestyles. Part of it might involve their demographic and sociographic characteristics.
Can't
That a
regulate
start?
based on the demographic characteristics of residents. That's
Yeah.
literally redlining.
Absolutely. Literally.
Yeah, I think we
I
passed
think you
that.
can be respectful of the people
I think that that's a non-issue for me. I think it gets into very hairy areas of spot zoning, it gets into redlining. It's not worth it to try to pick and choose which areas we believe should be more protected than other areas. We are not to say that. And we're planning for what we want to see in that area. I always go back to that. Like, our definition of this appointed position is future-focused planners. So what are we looking for in that area? We can use character if people want to use character. I don't use character. But if we want to specifically look at R2 and say, I think I want this, this, and this, we can stick within that. But to me, these R2s look fantastic. They're pretty similar. There are bits and pieces that I can pick that are similarities or not similarities. A lot of them are really near to, not trunk lines, but like to a larger street. And they're supposed to be kind of those in-between, I can't remember the term we used. Transitional in the master plan. And so it really fits along 8th, along Garfield. So I don't have an issue with that at all. That's just my perspective.
I would pass this today if we could. I'm so tired of discussing this. This has been going on for, years.
If you're invoking character as based on the present character of any part of the city, invariably you end up in situations where it both exceeds zoning code because you have lots that might have been built prior to our current setbacks or other regulations, but also does not yet meet our zoning codes because you have a place that may have a vacant lot that can be eligible to be built as a single-family house. You can have a single-family house in R2. You can have a lot that has a dwelling on it that's very small, but you could quadruple the size of the dwelling unit without running afoul of our current zoning code. So how you define character in a document that's intended to be focusing on the future could be very difficult indeed.
I think that we have to also consider how you get from current to future. I think you have to.
How did we get from
We
the-
passed this.
How did we get from the past to the current? How did we end up with
One home at a time.
non-conforming houses?
We get there one home at a time.
That sounds very
And,
inefficient.
I'm pointing out that when I look at sections of R2, such as those, around State, Washington, and Webster, between Boardman and Wellington. And then I look at another R2 district, 8th Street, from Barlow to Rose. And then I look at another R2 district, that is Arbutus Court, from Baldwin to Boone. Each of those are very unique in terms of their locations relative to corridors, their current dwelling units.
And anybody that lives
and-
there doesn't have to do anything with this.
They're all within 200 yards of a highway that receives some MDOT funding, so I'd say proximity to corridors, they all fall in the same category.
Oh, thank you all for listening so carefully and open-mindedly. I really appreciate it.
I have to say, one of the things that I found very interesting is just the sentence that says, for the last 85 years, the R2 has already allowed 2 dwelling units, for 85 years. This has been around us. So it's not really changing anything except 4 units, and, however you add them up.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in
Yeah.
the memo that, there's this concern that by allowing this, all of a sudden there's going to be this rapid influx of redevelopment in that district. And I think the point there is that in a year and a half, after implementing a wide variety of small-scale changes, it only yielded 5 dwelling units or 5 permits throughout the whole entire city. If that was the case, if the market demand was that strong that was going to be the outcome, then I think one would expect to see all those single-family homes in the R2 that are currently allowed to be 2 dwelling units per lot having been converted to it. But clearly that's not happening. We're not seeing that happen. And that would indicate that, yeah, there are these different variables and backstops within the market and personal preferences that do kind of put a governor on the rate at which legally these changes could occur. But in actuality, it's much less always.
You have to add the cost to it, too.
Yeah, which is
Outrageous
So
at the
limiting.
moment, so, yeah. Any other comments? Brian?
So I'm supportive of this change. I am not supportive of trying to define character. It just seems like a buzzword to me for keeping things exactly the same as they are today. And that won't last because things will be different tomorrow, no matter what. And I think that, I like diversity. I like economic and socio-economic and demographic diversity. I'd like to see more diversity. We talk about having, we've been down the path where, when I think of, a community that has all its own character, I see all these houses that are built by one developer, they're all exactly the same. And they're all set for a certain type of person, and those are all the people who live there. And those people live in that community and limits their exposure to people who are not like them. And I believe that personally, that the more different people of different types and backgrounds we're exposed to, the more we can all get along and we can build characters in neighborhoods. Neighborhoods change. I've watched my parents' neighborhoods change. I grew up in a neighborhood with single family and duplexes. My neighborhood I live in now has a quadplex 2 doors down. Doesn't impact my property values, doesn't bother me, other than they have more young children living there than anywhere else, which in the summer is always fun to see them playing and heading up and down the street. So I think that adds something to my neighborhood. We talk about making, I don't know if this will make more affordable housing in the community, but if you look at land values in the city right now, there's 19 vacant lots in the city for sale. One of those is a 40-acre lot that's going to be very expensive to develop to get water to it because it sits on top of a mountain. Well, what we call a mountain here in the city anyways. But the rest of them, the average price per acre is between $411,000 and $2.3 million per acre. Okay? That means that if you can build 4 units, but they can't be as large as 2 units, you get 4 more housing. Most likely they're smaller, you're gonna charge less. Your costs to build are less because you always have those set costs, what they call the mobilization costs. In other words, the cost to bring all your equipment and everything there for the day, to get things set up and to tear things down. So if you're building 4 units, it's less money, not a lot, but it's less. And if the units are smaller to make them fit, it also means those units are gonna be less money. But that's really the only way you can control it. And land costs can be split in half, if you can put 4 people there instead of 2. And then the question becomes, is there damage to the community because we have 4 people living there rather than 2? And I think that's a question of perception. And until I've actually see it occur, I don't know, show me evidence of communities where they've allowed quadplexes and it's ruined the neighborhood. I guess that's the evidence you should be looking for, instead of just bringing new people, often younger people, into our communities. So, yeah,
If I
I'm
may
like ready for
respond.
the public hearing.
If I may respond, you and I are in total agreement on the benefits of a diverse demographically and class diversity throughout the city. Makes it for a richer experience for everyone. You and I are in agreement on the need for evidence. I was rather surprised to see this come back within the context of this is going to create affordable housing, because 18 months ago, this body was at pains to say, this is not about affordability.
Well, I guess for
And
that,
if I may
yeah, but,
finish.
yeah,
And I think that I want to know why we're doing it. If it's not going to have a big impact on the supply, and it's not going to change anything, why? Why
I
are
didn't say
we
it's not
here?
gonna change anything. I will tell you, it's nothing we do here is gonna have a big impact on the supply of housing in this community. We're 8 square miles. We're already pretty much built out, okay? But the difference is you get 2 more people who can live in a location they wanna be, as opposed to, you get 2 or maybe 4 more people into one location instead of 2. So in some ways, each victory is each little win there, if it occurs, is a doubling of, it's a double win. You get twice, you get 100% return on that. But is it going to solve the problems? There's no silver bullet. I mean, the question is this something that's going to benefit the community? It will bring in, or by giving more housing, will it be affordable? That's always going to depend on the demand. And if you lessen demand in any way, you can help. But is it going to create affordable? The only way you get affordable housing is to create subsidized housing. And we also heard from, who was in here at our last meeting?
John Stimson
John.
of Holmstruck.
Yeah. So, he looks at it and says, yeah, let's do this. We can create, that opens up to him more places where he can put 4 units as
Talking about
I can't
along
hear you, sorry.
corridors.
Sorry?
Did you notice that Mr. Stimson was talking about 4plexes along corridors?
That is where R2 is.
And, yeah,
And he said adjacent to the corridors, not located on them.
and we've been talking about
Like the
corridors.
property that they've been buying. So on the issue of affordability, I don't think anyone is directly saying that this is going to contribute to automatically affordable housing outside of what Brian just mentioned, supply and demand. Yeah, I think everyone realizes new construction is going to probably cost someone more to occupy than a 20-year-old unit. I don't think that's lost on anyone. It's really the role of the city commission to talk about the affordability aspect. This body has no authority to apply incentives, to create policy for pilots, for any of those other things. This is not the realm of affordability and incentives. That's the role of the city commission. And so right here, we're talking about land use and the ability to make land more available for dwelling units, which is what the city has been talking about. So that's the role of this body there. Now, there is some really interesting research out there, and I can share some articles with you if you like. There's a professor at UCLA who's been doing a lot of quantitative research on this, and yes, his data has shown that by allowing more high-end units or expensive units in communities where there's a market for it, that actually causes the rents to start going down on the rest of the housing stock. Because people who can afford high-end and they are desiring high-end, they don't want last decade's high-end, they want today's high-end. And so when you get new developments, then they're moving to that, and that frees that up. It's now no longer the newest, most high-end development in town. There's a new shiny ball that's driving everyone's attention towards. So then rents start to go down on that. And he has multiple cities that he can quantify what the percent is after these developments and things like that. So again, housing is one of those really complex ecosystems, Jackie. There is no single change that's going to make widespread change. And at the end of the day, the city is a regulator. They're not a builder, they're not a developer. They set the development rules, and if no one wants to show up to the party, then no one's going to show up to the party. But that's not the city's control. They can play their part. It's a partnership in how this happens. So, yeah, I think the focus here is on availability and allowing more diverse housing typologies to exist throughout the city.
Thank you for the offer, Sean, to share that research. I think we'd all be very interested in seeing it.
Yep. Pull it up now.
And in terms of whether this body is, concerned with property values, there's language in our brand-new master plan that's statements like economic development priorities in traditional neighborhoods include creating a stable tax base, high property values, selective housing density increases. What do we stand for? Are we preserving and enhancing property values?
How does this
trying
destroy the
to-
property values, Jackie?
Oh, I think.
How does
I
it
think-
decrease it?
I don't think it does. That's
Are you
what I'm saying.
suggesting it in
I'm
parts
saying that-
fundamental
I'm saying
instability?
that most of the research that I have seen indicates that increased density is going hand in hand with increased pricing.
Well, maybe
That's-
per acre, but we have.
No, per unit.
This is the first year fiscally that we have seen a drop in the median fair market rent as determined by HUD for a one-bedroom apartment in Grand Traverse County in 30 years, because we have more density.
Love to see your research on.
It's not
on
my
that.
research, it's HUD's research.
On
You
that
know what, I
cause
think
and
we
effect
all need to,
relationship,
I think we
Mr.
all need to
Treadwell.
go back and consider, when we were talking about the housing zoning amendments, we realized what Brian was just saying, that there aren't that many places to build. And I know what I felt personally was, if I could provide a home for 10 people, I was doing good. That's how I approached it and how I thought about it. And we have to provide housing, if we can, for everyone without assuming who would move into a quadplex. And I bring this up every time, and I'm going to bring it up again. There could be a retired person who's living in a large house by themselves, and they feel they have nowhere to go. That person might find a duplex very attractive to move into. You know, someone who's lived here a long time, who's been a very good citizen here, and it would open up a 3 or 4 bedroom house for a family. So I don't think we can make any assumptions on who would move into multifamily housing. So I hope we keep all of that in mind, that we're not going to solve the housing crisis, that we're just trying to do our part as little as we can. So those are my thoughts. Mitch? Oh, and
Yes.
Jerry. Go ahead.
To change the topic slightly, I'd like to bring up, once again, the suggestion of slight tweaks in setbacks, considering R1B is now functionally the same as R2, and yes, we're changing this to allow a triplex or a quadplex if a builder chooses to. But considering that we do have a number of lots that are narrow or otherwise could be a little trickier, just say shifting it from a side setback of 6 feet to 5 feet, and an aggregate from 14 feet to 10 or 12 feet.
Did bring that up. That's been brought up.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a conversation for the commission. No offense, Mitch, but
Yes.
we take direction from the body, not individuals. So
Yeah.
if that's the consensus of the majority, then
I'm just
yes.
raising the point again.
Yep, I appreciate you doing that.
What is
I mean, maybe we can add setbacks as an objective, investigate setbacks as an objective of one of the housing goal.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that could be looked at more broadly, beyond just the
Yes.
R2. I mean,
Correct.
we're talking
Yeah.
about a 2.3%.
To be more worth it and
Yeah,
valuable, yeah.
I think it's a worthy consideration. I think since, in the spirit of this amendment, which was brought forward because it was already queued up, I think
Yeah.
the setback discussion takes a little more analysis, and I think that therefore we should keep it separate for now. And again, Mitch, I think it's worth exploring. I just think it just needs more time than.
Could we just add it to the housing goal? That would be great. Thank you, Mitch. Jerry had his hand up a long time ago.
Yeah, so obviously I wasn't on the planning commission during all the prior discussions, but I guess I have 2 points. One would be, you probably have one in your head, Sean, or planning director Winter.
Curling teammate Winter.
Oh, you curled together.
But I'm just wondering, can you give like a scenario of how this would unfold? Meaning like how we have it today versus this change. So, is there a simple way to just explain, whether it's a private homeowner who now has this opportunity to put more dwellings or whatever? Like, how would that unfold? I mean, you've probably gone through this at some point. I'm just looking at like a scenario of someone that currently lives in one of these lots that now has this opportunity. I mean, meaning like the market forces, like they're gonna be like, oh, I can now add more, I want to do a fourplex on this lot. I mean, that's gonna take them, I'm just trying to figure out like, it just seems like this is gonna go slow. Like, who's lining up to do this? I mean, there might be certain people that have this in mind. Like, when Homestretch was here, that lot on Fern, the way it sits now, he can only put 2, right? So this change would allow him to put 4 on a vacant lot. So that's adding 2 additional units.
Correct.
That he wouldn't be able to do in the current zoning.
Correct, yes. And that's where, John has been before this planning commission a lot from Homestretch, and it seems like that kind of 4 to 8 dwelling unit type development is really their bread and butter. And he has said before, he's like, we can build quadplexes all day. And the thing is, they specifically ask for pilots, which makes these affordable. But there is a certain density where that economy starts to pencil out and start to work, especially if you are doing subsidized rents and things like that. So that's a case where that would probably, if this went into effect, that would probably be the first permit you would see under it, because they're queued up and largely ready to go. And he's even had his designers show that it can fit with the setbacks and stuff in there. Otherwise it's going to be individual property owners, most likely, who have probably never done a construction project, and they have this opportunity and they're going to explore it. And I know someone on the city commission, I know someone that I work with in an I department who have both explored projects and abandoned them because they're like, you just can't ever make the numbers work unless you're making so many decisions that you don't feel proud about what you're putting out there in the market. So, it does become challenging when you sit down to do that. And it's expensive, I mean, it is so expensive. We are trying to right now get a unit built above our garage for my widowed mother-in-law, and it'll probably cost 50% more than our entire house did 10 years ago, just for that. And it's a fraction of the size. And we don't live in a big house. It's got 40-year-old vinyl siding, and it's falling apart and all that great stuff, so.
Anyone else? One more, Jackie?
One more. The goal that we just approved was about allowing triplexes, quadplexes, and ADUs with a duplex in R2, specifically through pre-approved plan sets. And I'm wondering what happened to that part of our goal in this proposal.
Well, that is something that can still be explored. Again, we took the direction from the Planning Commission where the density component was already queued up, so that could be something that gets followed up next. We have actively been pursuing this. There's a new company out there that you basically get a subscription service to the plans. It's a new model that I think economically might work better for us. It was you may have seen it in your email. Is there value in pursuing pre-approved plans for ADUs? And at this point, the answer is no. We've explored that and abandoned it because our regulations require that the ADU be similar in architectural style to the primary house. So you can't have a set of pre-approved plans if each development has to match a specific house, because then you're talking about roof pitches, window placement, siding, all that kind of stuff. So we decided not to pursue those because it wouldn't be applicable here in the city. We wouldn't get any real return from that. So
Why would we break that out from the goal that we just voted in favor of adopting?
because that was the direction by the Planning Commission at that 2 meetings ago.
So in these pre-approved plans, aren't they normally a mixture of pre-approval? Isn't the value is to basically be able to choose from a plan that's already approved for both the zoning and building codes?
Building code, potentially. I mean, we're not involved in that, so we would have to maybe work with them. And even with the pre-approved plan, you're gonna have to hire a professional because you'll have the plans for the structure, but the pre-approved plans don't include a site plan because every site and parcel boundaries are different. So you do have to have some investment into it still.
And really, for us, for most projects, the only thing you're approving is the site plan for zoning. And that's a quick boom, boom. I mean, that's not a long process for most projects. If you're just getting site plan approval, especially for residential. I mean, I've been in there, it's, I don't know, took 30 minutes. And that included me chatting. So it's, you know, and it's cheap. The in-depth part is building construction codes. That's all at the county level. So I don't even see the purpose of pursuing pre-approved plans unless you can coordinate that with, you know, with the county. And even then, good luck, so.
Yeah,
But
and again, that's,
I just don't see the advantage to it.
that's where, you know, some of this has to be led by the city commission, right? I mean, because they would have to approve the authorization to spend the money to get those plans done. And really, this isn't providing more housing, which is really the planning commission's purview. It would be lowering the cost of housing by taking away the cost of having to hire someone to design the plan. So now we're talking about subsidizing development, which again really falls back to the city commission. And none of the things in the action plan were really discussed as we went through this last summer, you know. That was their opportunity to begin having some of those conversations, and that's not the way it went. So they may want to bring it up again to see what direction they can provide, but
And the question I have is, can you, you know, the idea about the plan was it was less cost and gave people an opportunity to look at certain designs. But we can't legally force somebody, can we, that you have to use this plan?
No, but they're available.
And they're available, we can make them available, but we can't force people to use them.
well, and to
So-
Brian's point, I mean, some communities have very onerous review processes. And so the pre-approved plans, and the city used to handle building permits in-house, but we have now contracted that out to the county with the other townships. In those scenarios, then yes, it really might make economic sense to explore the pre-approved plans as a cost-saving endeavor, but or one that speeds up the development. Now, Kalamazoo, they're starting to do pre-approved plans on 12 plexes, so multifamily, which have that higher level of site plan review. So that really is speeding up the process for them by having them pre-approved by like a month. And when it comes to developers, especially those providing housing, that whole development review process is carrying cost to them. They're losing money that whole time. So, you know, the quicker that can go, the lower the prices could potentially become on the units.
I am going to sound like a broken record, I think, but can we bring this back up when we have the county liaison here? Is it worth it? Could we just bring it back up at the next time we talk about the housing objectives and see if they think there's any bite or even value to it.
And you're talking about the pre-approved plans, right? Okay.
Yeah, the county, his actual title is Community Development Director, or Coordinator at the county, hosted a pizza party on Thursday for all the township and city planning and zoning people at the construction code office, just to have that opportunity, because again, that's his role, is really to unite a lot of these different
And I didn't
efforts.
sneak
so.
in.
What's that?
I didn't sneak in and get some free pizza.
Didn't smell
Yeah.
the free
Even
food.
smell it.
And it's very interesting to be in those conversations, because our development process is so much different here in the city compared to the townships, right? Where they're dealing with wells and septics, and that's a whole nother different levels of permitting and requirements and things like that.
Okay. How are we going to bring this back up?
I mean, again,
Oh, it's a
there's-
March 4th hearing.
Yep.
Yeah, so I would say to move things along, if you have any other questions or comments before the March 4th hearing about this that we need to have answered, could you submit them by whatever date? Tell me the Thursday before, March 4th?
Well, yeah, I mean, we do have a study session coming
Oh,
up.
that's right,
in
we do.
2 weeks and a
Yes.
day, so please note that it'll be on a Wednesday because of President's Day. Everything shifts. Jess, we'll miss you. Curling night.
I realize that. I told Kate.
So we can put it on the agenda, just in case questions pop into your mind, give you the opportunity to discuss it. It'll be a study session, there's no action or anything, just put it
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, that'd be great. So
Okay.
let's bring this back on the 19th for any more comments. How's everybody feel about that?
Which
And-
we publish that one on the 13th. So
So-
we'd need, if you have questions that you want
Before the
answered.
13th. Okay, that sounds great.
And if questions come up after the 13th, just know there's gonna be more bites at the apple. We'll meet again on the 4th and things like that. And if you ever have a specific question of staff, you could email us or stop in.
Thanks for a good discussion. Is there any public comment? Please state your name and address.
Paul McCarthy, 401 Washington. I am a owner-occupier of a duplex with an accessory dwelling unit that is sitting vacant because it can't be legally rented. So this is something that could be on the market within months. A little bit of fix-up and some fresh paint, and it would be out there. I hear that this is, has been proposed many times over years, and it's just sort of dragging along, and I would like to at least provide home for one more person, so.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Angelique Norman. I live at 119 North Oak Street. Just wanted to comment, I think that the slightly higher density that this is providing is a really great way to seamlessly add to these already existing neighborhoods, so thumbs up there. In reviewing the graphic, I had some questions about the number of structures. So one of the graphics shows 2 duplexes and a garage, which I believe that would count as 3 structures, but for how I understand it, it would be 2 structures that would be allowed. And then all of the graphics do show off-street parking, and as I was trying to educate myself on what was required, I was confused because it states in the code that motor vehicle parking compliance required in all districts except for C4. You probably know the rest, and then we get to residential, no minimum requirement. So the graphics, showing all of these triplexes, quadplexes, all with off-street parking, I don't know if that's a true representation of what's being listed. But I'm thumbs up on these R2s being 4plexes.
Thank you. Looking at the graphic here.
And I can provide some clarity to that, to the commission. Thank you for that, to the commenter. It's 2 structures for residential purposes, sorry. You can still have a garage, because today you could have 2 detached homes and a garage, so it would be the same format. It is correct, residential uses throughout the city do not require parking. But we don't allow parking, for the most part, overnight on the streets. So since I've been here, we've yet to issue a permit for any residential that didn't have off-street parking, because they know either the homeowner or the tenant will likely have a car and therefore have to have a place to park it, since they're not allowed to park it on the street overnight, with the exception of weekends and the summer months. Unless, you know, the city changes that.
But we do have dwellings in the city with fewer than one parking spot per dwelling unit.
Correct, yep. By getting rid of the minimum, that did not stop people from providing parking, as we've discussed in the past. Most of the time, the lenders that finance the developments require parking, because they don't want to see the development fail over the lack of parking. But it allows the developers to right-size the parking to the needs that they see be necessary to make the project work, as opposed to like more of an arbitrary number assigned to it.
Okay, is there any other public comment about this? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to new business, which is the introduction of this capital improvement plan.
All right, so every year we create a capital improvement plan. It is a plan, not the budget. It is a plan, like all plans are used to inform action, in this case, the budget. And we are required by law to have a capital improvements plan, or a CIP, that schedules projects over the next 6 years. So some of these projects are included in here because they're necessary maintenance improvements. Some of them are simply planned improvements. Some of them are needed to meet required capacity increases for fire flow protection and drinking water and things like that. The origination of most of these projects that you see in here come from different city plans. Of course, there's the master plan, but there's also mobility action plan. There's a Lower Boardman unified plan. The water and wastewater systems each have 2 plans that they had to do to be eligible for the state revolving loan fund. So needless to say, we have a lot of plans with a lot of prescriptions, and that's where most of these projects originate. Now, you may notice it looks a little different this year, and I would ask that you bear with us. The city switched to a brand new software program, not only for CIP, but we will now be using it also for our budgeting. I think certain forms and applications, but we really just wrapped our heads around this about a month ago. So it's a little clunky for us as well, and so we will be happy to work through this with you. We went through and everyone manually entered all their new projects. What you will see March 4th at the public hearing will look a little different than this. This is more of the project list. It has a function where it'll dress it up and make it look much more like a report. But our communications manager would like it to have a consistent design as the budget. So she's currently working on coming up with that design template, because these 2 documents go hand in hand. So the CIP, again, informs the budget. Not everything in the CIP will make it into the budget, and it's not required that a project be in the CIP to be budgeted. So if the city commission collectively has certain actions or projects that they want to fund outside of what has been programmed in the CIP, then of course they're certainly able to do that. Now, the role of the Planning Commission in this process is the law requires that you hold a public hearing and then review to make a determination whether or not the projects are consistent with the master plan, or in some cases you could word it as inconsistent with the master plan. So the example I've given before that's pretty simple is if you had a part of your community that your master plan designated for conservation or preservation, and the CIP was speaking about extending water and sewer mains to that location, building a road to that location, that would be inconsistent, because now you're making infrastructure investments that would support future development in an area that the plan is saying should be for preservation. So that's really the role of the Planning Commission in this process. So at this point, we're going to follow the same format that we have done in the past years. Tonight, you're being presented with a list of projects. If you scroll through, it provides the detail for you on them. We would ask that you email Katie any questions you have on the specific projects by, I believe we said the end of Friday of this week. Because what we would like to do is distribute those to the relevant staff to get the answers, compile those answers, put them into the memo for the study session on the 22nd, I think it is, somewhere in there, and see if that sufficiently answers everyone's questions. If there are still questions lingering on that, then we will ask that staff member to come to the public hearing. But we don't want to ask, 15 different staff members to come just in case a question comes up. We'd like to be a little more intentional with how we manage their time. So, any questions on that at this point?
Mitch?
I can say that I'm glad to see a number of these projects that I'd say have been long overdue in here. Like, as personally somebody that cares about that culvert, the Kids Creek at culvert at 11th Street. I'm probably the only person that's been through that in a boat, and I've done so a dozen times, but I can say that it is in a deteriorated state underneath it. It's under capacity. Unlike the one block of Cedar Street between Front and 6th that didn't flood every year, but because it is under capacity during the flood of 2020, the creek ended up rising 5.5 feet at that location and overtopping the road. Other projects that I'm glad to see are the sidewalk along Eastern Avenue from Milliken to Senator Highway. And to see the reconstruction, it's several years out, but of 7th Street, the road I live on, and the longest road in Traverse City that is for its entire length, rated as a 2 on the Pacer scale.
Thank you. Brian, you had something?
Some questions. Do we have the ability to vote anything off the current CIP?
Let me check on that with you, like a line item type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
if
would
we
check with the
don't
attorney.
think it meets the goals of the master plan, can we say this should be struck?
I think so, but let me verify with the attorney on the legal authority.
And what we have in front of us is the entire master plan? I mean, the entire CIP?
Yeah.
Oh,
Seems
well,
shorter.
It's much shorter.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out if there's more to it somewhere.
Yeah,
No,
But
so,
I didn't like the new software program. I went on it and it too
Many
much.
of the projects,
It was
they got
not
on
very
one
easy
page
to
rather than
use,
two.
so I liked it all. Thank you for putting it
In
in
this
that
format, yeah.
one sheet. It was easier to follow and find the descriptions of what is being proposed.
Brian, I will say you created quite a stir today when you commented on an item, and
We
we
didn't
all
know-
got emails.
we didn't know that was a functionality that existed. And all of a sudden, all department heads get an email from Brian commenting on a project. We're like, what is happening?
I was
Did he
wondering.
hack into our system?
I was
guess-
wondering if I should be commenting on everything or just
I didn't know
save
if we should
comments
either.
to-
I was
I would say the best thing is to email your questions directly towards us. I don't want
Okay.
anything to be overlooked because it was a comment in that software that we missed.
Okay.
As we learn the functionality of this program, we may interact with it differently. We just haven't had time to wrap our mind around all of it yet. I know we've done a number of demos as a staff with them, and we're really excited with what it's going to bring to the table, but we're still in the learning curve portion.
Okay.
So,
Any more, Brian?
No, that was it.
Look what
Thank
you did. Jackie, did I? Yes.
Yes, you did. I was rather surprised at the lack of CIP requests for Parks and Rec. I saw Parkway Irrigation, I saw Hickory Hills Tractor. Is there more coming? Are we just not spending on Parks and Rec for the next?
We spend from Brown Bridge
6
on
years?
Parks and Rec.
yeah, I mean, these are the type of, so these projects that you see in here, every department enters individually. So I can't necessarily speak for parks. That's why you'll need to send that via email to us. But what I have heard from Michelle, who runs parks, is she's been waiting, projects are informed by plans. And so she has an item before the Parks and Rec Commission, I think this week, about the new updated Parks and Rec plan. So I would imagine once that gets done, then we'll see the CIP starting to get filled with specific
So
projects.
there may be some expansion from the draft that we're seeing right now.
No, I'm talking like in future years.
Future years.
Yeah, she hasn't, the city commission hasn't even approved the contract to start the new Parks and Rec master plan. So,
Another question that I had was about the comment that you mentioned about, the planning commission is tasked with preparation of the CIP, but that it is possible for it to be exempted from that requirement and the preparation taken on by the city commission. Has that ever happened in Traverse City?
not to my knowledge.
Are you aware that it happens anywhere else?
The only time it may happen somewhere else is in small rural communities that don't really have staff or infrastructure or anything like that. Yeah, like in other rural communities that I've done some work with where they don't have a planner or really any full-time staff to help them, then the planning commission ultimately does it, unless there's been some sort of resolution that says that authority will go to the city commission. It used to just be done by the city manager completely until about 10, 15 years ago. And someone retired and the city manager walked it down and handed it to planning and says, you do this now. So all we really do is facilitate the process. Again, every department, I could not tell you anything about what diameter water main is needed on what street. I just don't have that knowledge. So that's why each area specialist adds their projects consistent with their department's plans and the city's policies and things like that. Brian, to your point, because you haven't been here as long, we have spent the last few years revising the CIP process and what goes into it and getting that list kind of trimmed down to something more manageable, because as we've talked here in your absence, it really became a dumping ground for anything and everything. Like, oh, you need a new computer, put it in the CIP. Well, really, this is about capital. So we've set some thresholds of scale of development and costs that qualify into it. And if it's something that's just part of your maintenance or a reoccurring budget, that just goes in the budget. It's not part of capital planning, it's just budgeting.
It used to be if Sean needed a new chair, it was in the CIP.
I know.
And I need one like every 6 months.
Yeah.
Really?
No.
And also that 3-inch binder that we would have to go pick up for review.
Yes,
No,
this
thank
is
you.
much better.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Jackie?
Yes. Speaking of formatting, last year, Sean, I believe I contacted you with a request that we try to create something that was an executive level summary that gave us the 30,000-foot view of all of the projects ranked, prioritized, calendarized, et cetera, and something similar to what Light and Power has been creating for years. And I understood from you that the Lucity software that you were using last year didn't permit that, and I'm wondering if we can take another shot at that. I find the Light and Power 1.5-page summary to be a really useful decision-making tool because of its prioritization. And as I looked through the various department summary pages and the overall lists of projects, I really couldn't find anywhere that there was a recommended prioritization or ranking or even comments in terms of relative importance. Thought we could take another shot at that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when you have your March 4th public hearing, you'll receive a new report that the communications manager is trying to put together with that executive summary and dress it all up more like that. We're just not there yet, so that will be coming.
I mean, projects were being entered in this on
The day we
Thursday when
published
we were
it.
publishing this.
Yeah.
Like, we've just been,
Because
So
again,
it's a random list.
no.
absolutely
much.
not.
No, that's not what I mean at all.
No,
I
Jackie.
just,
I
the software
understand.
the software is just brand new to everybody, and so we've just all been trying to like learn the software, and then they have to put all their projects in and everything, and not everything is exactly the same as in Lucity, so we're just trying to figure that out. But the ranking, the prioritization, that kind of stuff, we are talking about that, but
Didn't make the cut before this had to get
well,
published.
this had to get published,
Yeah.
and this is what is I mean,
I
what's
mean, this
there
the
is what
CIP.
actually is needed.
Yeah, these are needed. And that's, yeah, it's interesting. We'll have, you know, some of this will probably have to come out during the budgeting cycle with the city commission. You know, like, I don't think your utility director is putting in projects that are fluff pieces. I think they're necessary for maintaining clean water and stuff like that. So,
I'm trying to understand the prioritization between, you know, sewer plant and water upgrades versus establishing an entry point for bicycles into Oakwood Cemetery. You know, I'm trying to get a sense of a ranking of relative importance from the point of view of the department heads. You know, certainly you're having conversations about the smartest way to use capital funds, and I'd like to see that thinking.
yeah, that's not actually my role at the city
Yeah.
at all. So I can see what I can do on that for you, though. But really, I mean, what you're describing is largely that's what the city commission does. They make the budget, and not all these capital projects can be afforded by the city. So it's really the city commission who needs to make those value judgments when it comes to what they're willing to budget and not. And so we can work with some of the department heads on that, but I just don't know if it's set up for what you're trying to accomplish, because what I'm hearing you saying is very different than the roles that a lot of them are playing.
If I'm going to be one of the decision makers, then I'd like to have summary information similar to what Light and Power has been able to.
Brian?
Because it's good decision-making formatting and content.
I understand why Commissioner Anderson wants the summary information, because she sits on the city commission. But for us, well, part of my question about whether or not we can actually reject something, I'm looking at the instructions in the charter, and you can interpret that all we need to do is hold a public hearing on it, that we have no say over it whatsoever according to the city charter. That's why I want some clarification. We may not even need to see it. We just put it out for a public hearing, take the comments, and our job is done. But we, in the past, have traditionally held whether or not items, you know, meet the needs, and that's what we've debated as Planning Commission, whether those projects are in alignment with the city master plan. So I'm okay doing that going forward. But if we're not able to say yes or no on a subject regarding whether or not it fits with the master plan, then there's really no point in our spending time on this whatsoever, because we don't really have a role. Because we don't actually prepare the master plan, though it says so under state law. The charter says the Bordeaux or something. I don't know, you have a typo in here. I don't really understand. It sounds like it's a city who's preparing it, which is how it actually works and functions. So, I mean, we don't need to look at the plan overall. We're just looking at each item.
Right.
So a summary serves no purpose for us.
To see if it's consistent with the
Yeah,
plan.
it serves no purpose for us. I mean, it's interesting information, especially if you have to look at the big picture of things and how they're prioritized. But for us,
Yeah.
we just want to know whether or not it belongs.
And really only the applicable ones, the ones that apply to like land use, because there's a public safety video surveillance system one in here that I'm looking at right now. And could that apply? Maybe, but does it? Not really.
I look at public safety and sewer and water. Those are all called for in the master plan. So now it becomes a judgment.
Yeah.
Whether or not, you know, does it help public safety? Well, if it helps public safety, then it's in alignment with the master plan. Whether it's a good thing or not, that's a whole other question. But for us, our review should be strictly on whether or not it's in alignment with the master plan. And my questions will ask that question specifically. Explain how this meets the master plan. So.
Jerry?
Yeah, so just trying to think of an example. So like, let's say, and correct me if I'm wrong, in our master plan, there's not anything in there talking about building like a 200-foot pier into West Bay, right? Like that's not stated in there. So would that be an example?
Only 200?
So like, if we had, so let's say a department's like, I want to build this pier, we could be like, that is not in line with the master plan. I'm just trying
You
to.
would have to interpret the master plan to say whether it's in line with it or not. Just because something's in the master plan or not in the master plan doesn't mean a specific project is in alignment with the master plan. So you could, the master plan, I'm sure, has a statement that we value public recreation and recreational opportunities in our waterfront. So you could say that 200-foot pier into the waterfront, creates better interaction between those who can't afford to live on the water or afford boats, and, those who still want to be able to get out in the water, but maybe don't want to get wet. So, I can argue it both ways.
Well,
I
and
can
I think-
also argue it's an environmental disaster waiting to happen. So then it becomes a judgment call among us as a group on whether or not it
Yeah, I think
means that.
Brian just hit the nail on the head. Essentially, it's this body's role to interpret the plan in the context of the plan in its entirety and to make judgment calls. A plan's not going to list every single possible thing that the city may need to do in the next few years. It sets a vision, it talks about some specifics to get there. So again, that's where you got to make the value judgments based on that. And, to Anna's point, and, there may be things that aren't related to land use. We've been talking internally about expanding our definition of what counts as capital infrastructure, because now we're going to become our own IT manager. So IT capital is probably going to start going in here, because as we have to start buying big servers and things like that, those are big budgets that, that's why we lay things out over 6 years, so that the city commission, the city manager can see what some of these planned improvements are coming down the line, so that they can start budgeting accordingly and setting money aside and stuff like that.
All right, so to wrap this up, you're going to send in any questions that you have ahead of next week. And I think I heard you say we're going to get something from Colleen before the March 4th meeting? Is that what I heard you say?
That's the
Yeah,
plan.
she's working on.
Okay.
The template for
making
later.
this nicer, yeah.
Yeah, so there's nothing else. Does the public have any comments about the capital improvement plan? All right, then we'll move on to reports. Any updates from the city commission?
We had a meeting yesterday with
Few
our,
fireworks.
I'd say the first half of our annual hour-and-a-half long salt debate. I think we went for about 40 minutes, but we'll see when that comes back in April, how much time we spend on it then. But I guess especially just after winter storm, it becomes a little contentious how much we're going to spend and purchase to put salt on our roads.
There was approval of an allocation of $100,000 for 2 transitional beds at ATS for specified use upon the advice of the QRT teams, social worker and public safety.
And there was a proposal to ask MDOT if they could possibly have a 6-foot median in Grandview Phase 2.
Okay.
Since that's what everybody's calling it.
That's the roundabout part.
It's from Division to
Cherry Bend.
the roundabout.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
the whole project is from Division to Cherry Bend.
Got it.
And most of that project area by linear foot is in Elmwood Township, not the city.
But the important part is here.
Yes, it is. And the roundabout is fully in Traverse City.
Yes. Anything else to report? That's it?
Those are the salient
Okay.
points, I think.
Any updates from the planning department?
Not much, just general city announcements. The clerk's office each year holds its city academy, where residents can kind of get a crash course over, is about 6 weeks?
8 sessions.
8 sessions. Some weeks have multiple sessions. Lunches or dinners provided. Those applications are now open. If anyone's interested in getting a real in-depth look at city operations, everything from how we do budgets to the treatment plants to all that stuff, it's a great program. We would encourage people to apply. The other announcement is, if you you live anywhere near this, you know it, but the utility work in preparation for the next round of Grandview started on Monday. So M72 does have a closure, 22 is open. So please be aware that if you're heading that direction, you'll need to seek alternate routes.
Thank you. The Grand Traverse Commons, did Joint Planning Commission? Yes.
Yes, we had a meeting. It was rather short. We got updates on the water situation for the Grand Traverse Barns, and it does look like they'll have water pressure going forward, so that's always a good thing. And we got updates from the Minervini Group on how they're progressing with their redevelopment efforts.
And Commissioner Trenwell is now the chair.
Correct.
Congratulations. Excellent. Board of Zoning Appeals did not meet. Anything?
And has been canceled for next week.
Yes, it has. Anything for the Riparian Buffer Committee?
No. I think we're waiting on Leslie to nail down a time frame for all of us to meet.
Okay.
And she's currently working under some really tight CDBG deadlines to get the reporting done so that the subrecipients can start drawing down their approved funds.
Okay.
But she is working on riparian buffer.
Oh, yeah.
Very thoughtful.
Working with staff on it.
Awesome. Anything else for the greater good? Is there any final public comment on anything from anyone? Then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Kyle.